So thank you very much. My name is Giulia Barbareschi, and today on behalf of my co-author, most of which are actually sitting in this room, Chihiro, Sato, Seray, Senyer, Michael Pan, Junpeng, Jianrui, Zhao, Dunya, Chen, Kunze, and Kirsten, Ellis, I'm presenting to you our paper. Now, I listed the name of all these authors, but I want to take the first moment of this presentation to introduce you to the 14 women without whom none of actually what I'm talking about today would make any sense. It's only thanks to their collaboration, their enthusiastic participation, and their feedback that we were actually able to do this. So regardless of whether you are an 70 to 80 years old Japanese woman, I think we can all agree that digital literacy is getting increasingly important in everyday life. And one of the things is that unfortunately older adults, like many other marginalized groups, do face structural barriers in engaging with technologies. Now, for many marginalized groups, actually electronic making has been proven to be highly successful to get people to familiarize themselves with concepts that tend to be very abstract in an embodied manner. And thankful to many of the HCI researchers and from other fields that have developed different types of toolkits and strategies to engage with electronic making. There is many approaches that tend to suit different needs and preferences. However, when it does come to digital literacy for older adults, a lot of the focus tends to be on digital tools, digital platforms, one-to-one tutorials on sort of like more abstract interactions. And that's real missed opportunities, because there is also an awful lot of literature that documents how crafting, whether that is as a personal hobby or as a social occasion, does play a really huge role in the life of older adults. The study that I'm talking about actually takes place in Chiba Prefecture in the city of Yachiyo. If you step outside the conference venue and look straight across the bay, you're actually looking pretty much in the correct direction of it. Many of you might know that Japan is a super aging society, has an aging rate of almost 30%. Yachiyo actually topped that big time. Almost 45% of the local residents are 65 years or older. And we've been very lucky that since 2019, actually, we've been working with the Social Welfare Office, with the local communities, and with many of the groups on the ground to run all sorts of participatory research. Some of it is technology mediated, other not. We run a lot of workshops and activities with local groups together. And a lot of it is to do with the social practices of crafting and how these encounters do lead to the concept of ikigai in Japanese. It's life worth living. One of the things that came out is that older adult women had a huge interest in engaging with technology and digital making, but didn't really know how. So we put our heads together and tried to figure out what kind of existing toolkits we can use that could be accessible, could support different kinds of making. I am very lucky to be a friend with Kirsten Ellis, who is sitting over there, who actually developed the Tape Blocks toolkit. Tape Blocks toolkit is highly accessible, consists in basically wrapping conductive tape around foam blocks and sticking electronics sort of components to it, putting them together. So we put some of the blocks together, we brought them to a community center and sort of played around with some of the women over there in a very casual section. And what came out very quickly is that the form factor of the toolkit is in fact very accessible. They could understand really quickly how to engage with it, but the form factor did not resonate with any of the crafting practices that they normally engage to, with the things they like to do, and especially with the things they wanted to make. So we had a group discussion, a bit of back and forth, different sketching session, and we came up with the idea of extrapolate how the tape blocks work and apply that to the manufacturing of digital electronic cards that could be used for New Year's. New Year's, in contrast to, for example, Christmas in many sort of Western countries, is probably the main sort of celebration around the end of the year. So we engage with this 14 women. All of them are between the age of 70 and 80s. And we developed this idea of making basically a collage card that could be pimped up, if you want, using electronics. And we use standard circuit making, basic components, LED, switches, vibration motors, propellers, and so on. We were originally planning one workshop, but it went so well that a small group of the women, about 5, decided to run a second workshop for local children that they were facilitating and we were helping. This is a very important thing. So what did we observe during these 2 workshops? So one of the things is that women were very keen in engaging and learning using a hands-on approach. We actually had at the beginning of the first session a little bit of an explanation about basic concepts of how to wire things. And honestly, all that it did was to make them very worried about the fact that they were about to engage with something that they had absolutely no idea of. However, what became very quickly apparent is that as they were doing the collage for making the front of their card, they acquired a lot of confidence and they just started wiring things together using a combination of like observation of what the other ones were doing, a little bit of trial and error, and a lot of the explanations were very contextualized about debugging. That is actually what makes it very clear. The other thing is that, and that tells you a little bit about the fact that they wanted to run a second workshops, is that although in the discussion that we had, there was a lot of talk about the fact that they wanted to learn, really that was a stated practice. What came out in terms of being extremely interested was 2 things. One was making something that was aesthetically pleasing and beautiful, that could be exhibited in the community center, that would become a testament of someone's skills, and that could be given to a loved one or shown around. The other thing was this idea of moving very quickly from the role of a learner to the one of teacher. Because that reinforces a positive social role in their communities. These are women that run this community center. They're a point of reference for other residents in the area, young and old. And it all becomes centered around the social practice. Now, what does that say in terms of like long-term implication and things, and how you approach this type of things? Well, there are 3 things really that I think are worth highlighting. One is the attention around the stated and unstated, I would say, purposes that drive people to engage with these kinds of activities. Yes, they might be keen to learn, but learning for the sake of learning is rarely very appealing. And making does have a social role. It's not just about the production of artifacts, albeit that is important. It's about what you do with the artifact itself, where is it placed, and what does the engagement in the workshop in itself leads to. The other thing is flexibility around the idea of sort of modifying toolkits. Again, there is an awful lot of research and approaches out there about how you can get people into making. And taking an existing toolkit as it is might not necessarily work for the group that we're interested in engaging. So play around with it, and someone did coin the term of untoolkit before, and it's actually an extremely sort of good practice when it comes to this kind of hands-on community work. And the other one, I mentioned it before, the work wouldn't exist without the women that wanted to engage, but also would not exist without, in its current form, without the years of engagement that we had in the community in CHI that brought like to a very sort of honest mechanism of feedback of like, this we want to do, that, no, there's no point. And it's part of the fact that at the end of the day, if you ask me, most of our participants will say that we're doing like a service to their community. We're not. They're doing a service to us. Their community would exist without us, but we wouldn't have our job without them. So I hope I have succeeded in getting you a little bit interested into checking out our paper. But if you have any questions, please do ask. Thank you.
Yeah, any question?
Of course you do.
Of course I do. Of course. Hi, Julia. So I know that there's a philosophical book by a Japanese author called In Praise of Shadows, and one of the points he brings up is that many of the arts, traditional arts or technologies, were not designed to support Japanese traditional arts, which I think your work very much highlights. How would you suppose designing these design toolkits so that they're actually they can be more beneficial to more cultural art forms?
So thank you, that's actually an excellent question. I think it goes back to, and this is actually something that we're exploring right now. It starts from trying to understand what the crafting practices of the particular communities are. And they often would have idea around how different types of enhancement could make it interesting, could make it more approachable to other members of the community, particularly as a way to link with maybe younger children, or to make a cohesive exhibit. We have people right now working on collective sound art, with people doing sort of field recordings with local communities. But also one of the very funny story of how I almost set fire to my office has to do with the fact that we have a lot of people doing origami. They're interested in kinetic origami. One of the things is that electronic origamis are hugely complicated to make. So again, not very approachable. And it's our job then becomes, okay, there is this thing that you want to do. How can I take the practices that exist, the tools that exist, so that you can actually do it in a way that is satisfactory to you? Our job is really about trying to link, in my opinion, between these two.
Hi, thank you. I'm curious if you feel I feel these themes of craft and literacy could also be applied to children in addition to the older adults community. So my question is, what do you feel is unique about the older adult community that wouldn't be transferable to the children community, and what are things that you think are transferable between those communities?
So there is a lot of similarities in my opinion, whether we're talking about older adults and children or other marginalized groups as well, like disabled people that might have been sort of shut out of more traditional making communities. One of the things that, in my opinion, it's very unique is how this connects to the social role that people have. Because that is often like very sort of contextual. It's also, a lot of it has to do with the form factor, the types of arts and the types of making that might be more sort of like approachable and engaging for children. For example, tape blocks, very popular. We did workshops in schools, very popular with children. You can make monsters, you can make trains. That's in a Japanese primary school, that will get you anywhere. But it won't get you anywhere with older adults, because the type of artifacts that they want to create is very different. So a lot of the core of the themes, I would say it's the same, but like the nuance of sort of what might be the specific key points, it then really depends on the persons themselves.
Thank you very much for your talk. So unfortunately, we can't take more questions. So you can